You're listening to Cloud9, where BahaiTeachings.org interviews artists from around the globe to learn about what inspires, uplifts, and motivates them to make a positive contribution to the world. My name is toloui-wallace. Juliet Crossley is a Nashville-based portrait artist, driven by an intense desire to change the imagery of Black people. Inspired by the principles and teachings of the Baha'i faith, Juliet's portraits are rooted in her hope for justice, unity, and the elimination of prejudice. Through the application of marker on paper, Juliet features the outer beauty of her subjects through the integration of diverse tones, bold patterns, and empowering dispositions. Taking it one step further, Juliet also captions each portrait with a divine virtue, such as hopeful, reliable, or loving. In one piece, the virtue Clement is captioned under an image of a young woman playing with her braids. Another portrait of a man holding a child is captioned attentive. By using these virtues as titles for her work, Juliet is identifying her subjects as spiritual beings, endowed with divine virtue, fulfilling their noble destiny. In this episode of Cloud9, we'll be discussing Juliet's creative journey and how race, motherhood, faith, and a profound sense of justice inspire her art. Juliet, thank you so much for joining us on Cloud9.
Thank you so much for having me, Shadi. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you. Now, I'd like to start this interview with the following words of Baha'u'llah. He says that arts, crafts, and sciences uplift the world of being and are conducive to its exaltation. Knowledge is as wings to man's life and a ladder for his ascent. Its acquisition is incumbent upon everyone. Reflecting on your own childhood, how did your parents encourage you to develop your own creative powers of expression?
Well, my parents are creative people by nature. They're both originally from Texas, but met in their early 20s in Los Angeles, around the time when they had found the Baha'i faith and became Baha'is. My mother had worked as an extra on movie sets and had modeled for photos. She also worked in communications and also at the hospital. But when she had us, she dedicated our childhood to being a stay-at-home mom and also served the Baha'i community locally in Nashville. So it was her love of art that really became my first influence and introduction to it. My father was a child musical prodigy, and with the support and encouragement of his father, he left home at the age of 13 to begin touring with some of the biggest bands in the 50s. He was writing songs for other artists and solo artists at the time. And then in the late mid to mid 60s became half of the 70s music duo Seals and Crofts. So about 10 years after my parents married in Los Angeles, they decided to go pioneering to Costa Rica. We moved there, it was May 1980, and so I was 2. And my older brothers were 4 and 7.
Could you describe what pioneering is for those of our listeners who may not know?
Absolutely. So pioneering is a kind of a call to action for people who want to travel to other areas outside of their local communities to offer service, but also specifically for community building and empowering the local neighborhoods. So it's a little bit different than missionary work, but it's the concept is to be of service and in the communities in which the individuals travel to.
Right.
So my parents, we were living in Los Angeles, but they felt a calling toward the Latin American region and traveled to various countries. And when they came to Costa Rica, my father always says he felt like it was home immediately. So growing up, my parents had always been big art lovers. And our home in Costa Rica just really reflected that. We had very avant-garde oil paintings and pastel portraits, indigenous wall hangings, experimental art pieces, and African masks and African sculptures. and really just several paintings by local Baha'i artists as well. And my dad actually began painting when we were kids too. So that was definitely influential for me. And then my mother expressed her talent and affinity for design through her touches that were found throughout our home. She had such a love of flowers and plants and art. And so she arranged these exotic flowers and placed them all throughout the house. And then she had beautiful potted plants in the corners of each room. And then I remember her as a kid, regularly, she was always reupholstering our furniture in these beautiful, unique custom patterns, and then constantly redesigning the interior of our home. So in addition to that, like, vibrant visual environment, there was also just so much music around too. So we had a recording studio that was off the main house, and there were guitars and mandolins and classical flutes and pan flutes, lap harps. And then there was this beautiful baby grand piano in there where my father would write and record. So when I was a kid, from the time of like age 6, I would spend many hours in the studio alone and plucking away at the piano. And that's where I taught myself how to play by ear and began writing some of my first songs. So to answer your question, I guess you could say that my parents encouraged me to find and develop my powers of expression, just like through the example that they were setting for my brothers and I, and the environment that they created for us. We were surrounded by all the time and in all its forms. And we were always part of family consultations, and we knew that we had a voice that was valued. So about very early on, I would say maybe 3 or 4, I began drawing, and I would spend a lot of time alone as a kid. My older brothers were much closer in age to each other, so they were often off mapping the jungle woods of our coffee plantation in Costa Rica. And I was quiet and loved to draw. So I'd spend hours alone sketching and illustrating. I would draw portraits and landscapes. And I even experimented with some abstract art before I even knew and appreciated what that was. But I was really lucky that my mother was such a big supporter of my art, and she really keyed in on my talents early on and was always the gatherer of resources for me to experiment. So she was formative in my journey and development as an artist. If I got an idea to create something, she would locate that material, whether it was like clay or wood for carving. She
really fostered that development within you.
She always found a way to get it right.
It sounds like you had a really idyllic childhood in Costa Rica. How did that
It was amazing.
influence or shape your own perception of race and identity?
That's so interesting. Yeah. So my mom is Black and my dad is white. And then being raised a Baha'i in Costa Rica was just the greatest gift that my parents gave my brothers and I. My whole life, from age 2 when we moved there until I was 19 when I moved to the U.S. to attend university, from that period, I always had felt a sense of belonging. Like by nature, the Costa Rican people are very warm and friendly and joyful, and family and faith is really important to them. And so they're content with whatever they have. And I feel like that perspective really influenced me growing up. And also there was a really nice sized group of pioneer families from various countries living there at the time we grew up there. And so that being friends with those kids really was instrumental for me, to be exposed to various differences. And then I attended a small international school with classmates from all over the world. So in a sense, like every experience I had as a kid had some kind of element of diversity to it that was celebrated. So I didn't experience any racism growing up. I know it sounds so crazy, but it was true. I just didn't have that experience.
So you've already mentioned that at the age of 19, you left Costa Rica to attend university in the United States. What was that transition from Costa Rica to the United States like for you? And did you face any challenges or surprises while settling into the U.S.?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, so I transitioned from this magical land of Costa Rica.
This beautiful jungle, like
right.
Coffee plantation with all this unity.
All this art
and
to the United States. And, after graduating high school and offering a year of service, I came to the U.S. and it was really jolting I attended the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and I majored in visual communication design there. And I was just hit really hard with the reality of what it meant to live in my skin in this country. And not having been raised here, I really found myself at this huge deficit when it came to being able to cope, with these challenges of being marginalized. I had never experienced that. Yeah, so it was difficult.
Do you feel comfortable sharing any of those experiences?
It's interesting because looking back, and even to still, living here now after 20 years, I find that the systematic racism that exists is often very easy to identify, but it's the subtle hints of dismissal or oppression, these things that we experience daily that are much harder to kind of communicate or even explain. But it was a lot of that that I was realizing I had never experienced before, just subtleties of things. And so there's something really amazing about the Black community in the United States. I mean, Black people just have had to develop such specific qualities and attributes to cope with the challenges that they face daily and generationally. And so there's so much to be learned from that perspective, and so much to be offered, really. And so I've been learning. I've been learning from my brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
Years.
Yeah. We have so much to learn from the constructive resilience of the Black community in the States and North America and around the world. Now, you moved to Chicago, as you mentioned, to study at the Art Institute of Chicago, and your time here was extremely formative, but it didn't come without its challenges.
Right.
Could you describe your experiences during this time at the Art Institute and how you were empowered to find your voice?
Sure. Yeah. So my education at the School of the Art Institute was really powerful for me as an artist, and it was completely rooted in conceptual foundations. So up until this point, I had been sort of creating art that was inspired, but I was learning that from my time at the School of the Art Institute that every task was being approached through the lens of what does this mean? And every aspect of the art we were creating, we were being challenged to see things through that lens. So I had to really take great effort to be mindful in my approaches and meaning, and really identify the intention of every artistic choice I was making.
Right.
And then as a Baha'i, learning how to balance this while still allowing the inspiration to come. That's been my process, really, my journey as an artist, because I'm learning that through art you can reveal truth, and if you are intentional with what you create, you can really be inspiring and inspired. So that was kind of my journey. Abdu'l-Baha, the eldest son of Baha'u'llah, who's, as you mentioned, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, says that for the intention, the power, and the action, all the three essential elements are brought together, and the realization of everything in the contingent world dependeth upon these three principles. So I feel like I was learning that art can actually be used to communicate something greater and has the power to achieve this. At that time, my work was not focused on the African American experience, but I was really figuring out as a Baha'i what sort of art I should be making, and learning how to incorporate the teachings of Baha'u'llah into that work, and the explorations of themes.
So interesting. So far in our conversation, we've covered your childhood in Costa Rica, your early exposure to arts through your parents, your transition to the States, and how you found your voice, as you just described, as an artist. I'd like to now take this opportunity to focus on your current work and how this came about. I know that as a freelance artist and designer, you're really motivated to work on projects that speak to you on a spiritual level, and these portraits portraying images of people of color in particular are a reflection of that. Could you begin by providing some background and describing the conditions surrounding these portraits and what propelled you to create them?
Sure. Yeah, this this project came about, it was really the response, I feel the response and urging of my soul. It came about at a time when there had been several shootings and killings of innocent Black boys and men and women. I think of Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and Freddie Gray and Eric Garner, Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. I mean, and on and on. So my heart was completely broken, really. And I was overwhelmed with all of this pain, pain for their families, pain for our country. And then I looked at my daughters and thought, my gosh, I have to arm them with the truth. They need to understand what true Blackness is. So I was inspired by them, and I started really just creating art that was informed by what I was feeling. And I felt like I really needed to promote a positive imagery of Black people for them to see. And I wanted them to see the value in us by representing us, and for them to see themselves in these images. So initially this art was really a direct, inspired by them, but as a direct response to the misrepresentation of Black people that I had seen and experienced firsthand in our society. And it was meant to reflect the true nobility of Black people.
Right. So I tried to do it justice earlier, but could you describe these portraits to our listeners, who your subjects are, and how you chose to portray them?
Sure. So the portraits I create are of real people. Some of them are people I know. Some of them are people that I look up to or are inspired by, artists or activists. Some of them are people that I like literally have gone up to on the street and asked if I can illustrate. And I create them with layers of marker on paper. But I try to elevate the portraits by the way that I position them. So I position them with a lot of white space. And it's kind of as if they're the pupil of the eye. That was kind of the intention. And I also adorn them with African pattern work, which to me is like a reflection of the African diaspora. I started making these just like one by one, and became prolific. I just had this collection that was growing and growing, and these images were becoming part of my daughter's lives. And at some point I just thought, well, I should create a digital space for them. And so I chose Instagram as a place to keep them as a group, so that I could just kind of refer back to them and look at them.
So how do people respond when you approach them, and how do you explain this concept and project to them?
Right. So it happened a handful of times when I would go up to someone who I'm just an observer of people in general. So I tend to watch people a lot, just try not to do it in a sort of creepy way, but I'm so fascinated by behavior and people. And so if I saw somebody that really stood out to me, or witnessed something that they did, or something that I felt like was being some light coming through them, I would just go to them and say, so I'm an illustrator, and I'm working on this project about the nobility of Black people. And I would have this conversation with them. And I mean, many times, every time they were willing to have their photograph taken, which was awesome. So I would photograph them, and then I would refer back to that photograph when sketching them. But I found myself having these really great conversations with people, and then they would follow that. I would see, like, a week or two later, I'd see them on my account. And so I really began to kind of form these relationships, which was just so beautiful. So that's how I approached asking strangers. But mostly the people that I was drawing were people that I knew, that I had witnessed their kind of these gems inside of them that they were showing the world and giving to the world, and felt like I needed to capture that in some small way.
Now, you've mentioned these virtues that you give your subjects. Could you expand more on the story behind these virtues, and how do you identify them, and what's the story behind them? So
the virtues and the qualities are really rooted in Baha'u'llah's teachings of us being spiritual beings. It's not my original idea. It's all from the Baha'u'llah's teachings. And so every image that I made, I really began to see the spiritual virtues associated with each of them. Many times I would create something and I wouldn't know what the virtue, I wouldn't really know it from the beginning, but through the process of creating the piece, it would become clear to me, like, oh, this person exhibits this quality, this virtue.
Right.
So I was going to the Baha'i writings and really identifying those virtues and being able to, like, or at least attempting to draw those out from the images that I was creating. And then sometimes I would have the quality know automatically, like, for example, my dear friend Maya Mansour, like, looking at her, I just knew she was brilliant and light, and that was what I wanted to capture in her portrait. So it's different, with each one is a little bit, the process is a little different, but the intention is to really highlight that spirituality that is inside of us.
It reminds me of that quote by Abdu'l-Baha where he says, "There are no whites and blacks before God. God does not look at colors. He looks at the hearts."
Wow, that's so beautiful. Yeah, so beautiful.
It's all of these souls are just radiating these beautiful attributes and qualities of the Creator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You've also already mentioned, you've referred to this quote by Abdu'l-Baha as Black people being like the pupil of the eye.
Yes.
He says, "To the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world." And for yourself, having not grown up in America, I'd love to learn how this particular quote has changed the way you self-identify and also how it influences your work as a figurative artist of contemporary African Americans.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this quote is everything. I love so much that there is something so specific in the writings of our faith written about Black people. I mean, it's, Abdu'l-Baha's quote speaks directly about this unique station of Black people. And it's really one of the first quotes that I like to share with Black people who aren't Baha'is. Like, this is one of the first quotes that I share with them. For me, the particular quote, more than anything, really helped me to claim my worth and to really find my identity. Like I said, I didn't grow up here, but I was very much connected to my culture. I just didn't realize in the ways that I was until I started making art early on. And then, of course, later on in when I moved here and exploring how to capture this journey through art. So, yeah, I think it just really helped me claim my worth. And I think Black people have always known our own magic and light, the way that we move and glide through the world in this style and manner that's all our own. Doesn't matter if you don't grow up wherever you grow up, just there's something that's very, like, universal about the way that we live in joy, even though there's this daily kind of subtle negations or dismissals. And I just really believe that Black people can reveal truth and often see things that others do not, and portals. I mean, that's what that quote means to me. And so my aim is for the work that I create to really live up to that standard and to assist, even if in some small way, to bring Black people to the station that the Baha'i writings have set, which is far elevated than anything that we see in society, really.
Right. So we've spoken a lot about the constructive resilience of people of color in America. What sort of feedback have you been getting for these portraits, and how have people been responding to them?
It just blows my mind. But I think when you're living in your truth, it's just like the doors open. That's kind of
right.
So I was creating this digital space on Instagram for my work, where it would, I suppose it would temporarily live there, and I could just sort of refer back to it. And then more people started following the account, and I started getting contacted through DM with feedback. And people were sharing with me.
Can you describe what DM is?
Sure. Oh, sorry.
Direct messenger.
Yeah, direct messenger. Sorry. Right. People were sharing with me how these images were resonating with them. And that was just the best and compliment as an artist, and so confirming for me to keep going. And then I found that people who hadn't heard about the Baha'i were reaching out to me and learning about it, or as a through the illustrations, or by, by asking where do these virtues come from, or how to identify these qualities, as you had asked. And so it became an opportunity for me to really share Baha'u'llah's message.
So it really became a teaching tool for you.
Yeah. So it's been such a, I'm still like, I can't really believe it. I'm like, wow, it's been really, really humbling for me to get feedback from people and to know that.
I'm sure. And I'm sure it's also very encouraging. You want to keep going.
It is. It is very encouraging. Yeah.
Well, Juliet, speaking from my own experience and reflecting back to the first time when I came across your work, as an Australian who moved to North America about 8 years ago, I really had to take on this humble posture of learning when it came to understanding the reality and the narrative of the African American experience. And when I came across your work, I was so humbled and moved by the way that you portrayed our brothers and sisters with such dignity and optimism. And I found this to be such a true reflection of the teaching of Baha'u'llah, of the oneness of mankind and the nature of the soul. And so I was really excited to interview you, and I was so grateful when you accepted this interview and for your time today. And I really want to encourage you to continue to create these beautiful portraits.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's so encouraging and so kind. I mean, I feel like I had kind of set out to do this for my kids, and it just grew from there. My girls are like budding artists in their own right. They're very creative and already use their own art to kind of work through their emotions and express themselves, and that's just such a gift for me to witness. But when I started the project a couple of years ago now, I remember they would sit and like often they would sit with me and watch me, and then they would want to draw too. So we began creating our portraits together. They would draw their own people, and now we always sit and work together as peers, which I love. And I don't try to teach them or anything. I mean, I can't teach them anything about this. They're teaching me more even about their art. And so I share with them my work. They share with me theirs, and I get to listen to their stories as they create. And it's so cool to be engaged in this process of creating together. It's really one of the most rewarding things for me. And then I already see the influence that this small act of representation has had on them. And that's really beautiful to see. Like, for example, just something so simple, but like if like they immediately go for like brown and dark colors when they're drawing skin, and they really like kind of default to that, and they see the beauty in that. And that's just been so confirming and for me as a parent to see that.
Of course. You mentioned you've been learning from your daughters.
Yes.
What other things have you learned?
Oh my gosh. Well, children are really, I think as parents, we have all this desires to kind of teach them things, which of course is our responsibility. And then we end up really realizing the things that we have to develop, because they are such they really absorb the things that we show them. We can tell them lots of things, but they see through our actions and our example. Like I did with my parents, the environment that they created, it really informed how I saw the world. And so yeah, I mean, they teach me a lot about myself and then they show to me, I get to see the beauty as they see it, through their eyes, by the things that they create, the things that they say, the things that they do. And so it's such an incredible ride, an incredible journey for me as a parent, as a spiritual being, to be able to, they help me grow in so many ways.
You're like an educator and a student at the same time.
Yeah, they're my teachers for sure.
Now, Juliet, we've sadly come to the end of another episode of Cloud9, and I know this project would not exist without your two little girls. So before we close, could you share perhaps what hopes and dreams you have for them?
Sure. Oh my gosh. My hopes and dreams for my girls is that they have a profound love for Baha'u'llah already, and appreciation for this beautiful faith. And so my hope is that will grow and be transmitted into teaching and service. I really want them to know their inherent worth and truth, and to continue to see the beauty around them as they do, and then reflect that back into the world in their own ways. And so I hope I'm always creating an environment that fosters that. And then there's this quote by J. Warren Welch that I've always loved. He says, that your children are not a masterpiece that you create. They are their own masterpiece, creating themselves. And you have been given the privilege of watching them be the artist. So while I birth these magical beings, they are universes unto themselves. And I'm just really blessed to travel with them on their soul's journey. So
Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for your time, and really all the best with your future projects and endeavors. And we look forward to catching up again and following along this journey of yours.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Shadi. So much love to you.
Love to you too. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Cloud9. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to check out BahaiTeachings.org, where you can find more Baha'i-inspired podcasts, videos, and articles.